Okay, good morning and welcome to today's webinar, which is entitled You've Been Hacked, Now What? My name is Ed Correa. I'm president of Sagacent Technologies and your co-host for today's event. I am joined here with Joe Delucci, who is the president of Cal Insurance, and we hope you find today's presentation informative. Before we get started, I want to remind that all participants are in listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded and it will be distributed to all registrants after the event. Thank you for joining the live session. We appreciate you. Please feel free to submit questions. You can do them either in chat, but we do prefer them in the Q&A box because that helps us as we go along. We'll do our best to answer your questions on the fly if at all possible. We will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of this presentation. And finally, we'll send you a brief 1-minute survey immediately following today's event so that you can please share your feedback with us. It helps us to do better in the future. Again, your hosts, myself, Ed Correa, and Joe Delucci.
Delucci, yes.
Joe, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you very much, Ed, and good morning to the participants joining us today live. So I'm Joe Delucci. I am the president and CEO of Cal Insurance. We are headquartered here in San Francisco. The firm's been around since 1927. I've been with the organization for 23 years.
I didn't think you looked that old.
No, not since 1927 for myself, but I have been on the Cal team for 23 years, acquiring Cal in January of 2016. And what we do, what Cal does, we design insurance solutions for businesses, for schools, for nonprofits, real estate investment groups, and successful families from coast to coast. I'll turn it over to you, Ed, to introduce yourself.
Great. I'm Ed Correa. I'm president of Sagacent Technologies. It's hard to believe, but this September marks 43 years for me in IT. I started with punch cards, believe it or not. I've been running my company, Sagacent Technologies, for 21.5 years. We're a 7-time honoree of an award called the MSP 500, which recognizes the top 501 managed service providers on the planet. The competition is getting fierce. Our core services to businesses, IT management, cybersecurity, and cloud services. But what I like to say, our passion or what we're maniacal about is reducing risks for businesses. Those risks tend to fall in 3 categories: reducing the risks of data breaches, unanticipated business interruptions, or compliance failures around regulations. Let's get the ball going.
All right.
Okay, our agenda today. I'll be talking primarily about hacking. I'll be talking a little bit about what's been in the news, what you need to know. I'll try and indicate what the problem is. I'll indicate a little bit about what the government's doing or not doing, and I'll give you some information on how to mitigate your risk. Joe?
So we're going to talk on my side about the cyber insurance platforms that are out there. We're going to learn that not all policies are created equal and not even close in some circumstances. We're also going to dig into some of the differences in coverage and what you want to be looking for as a buyer of a cyber insurance policy for your business, your school, your nonprofit. And we're going to try to figure out too, what's the right amount of coverage? What are we looking at out there? So that's what we're going to be covering in the insurance section of this.
Excellent. Well, let's dive right into an important preface. I say this a lot to my clients and just about anybody else I meet. It isn't if you get hacked, it's when you get hacked, and you need to be prepared. There's no such thing as 100% secure. If you can use a computer, you're vulnerable. Your vulnerability is measured in risk. It's either high, medium, low, and you have to decide where you want to be on that risk scale. There's no single product or solution that you can buy or fix this. And I was telling Joe earlier, nothing gets me more angry than to see a commercial or hear a radio ad where they're saying that you buy this product and you're secure, because it's a lie. You need multiple products and solutions, and they need to be maintained in order to keep you secure. And finally, cloud solutions are not automatically secure. the cloud is synonymous for somebody else's computer. And just because you're using the cloud doesn't mean it's secure. It still needs to be secured and maintained. And often the cloud's biggest weaknesses are their own customers.
And I can't tell you, Ed, how many times I've heard that from a client in the past going, we feel pretty secure. All of our stuff is up in the cloud. And that's just not simply the case, right?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, a lot of people wake up and find that their email is all encrypted. Those are business email compromises. If it's in the cloud and it's not secure, or if the company, the employees are not using secure practices, the cloud is just as insecure as having things in your office. So the first thing in the news I want to talk about, I'm going to very briefly talk about 5 newsworthy items. The first one is SolarWinds. This is a hack that was perpetrated in September 4th of 2019. It wasn't discovered until months later. SolarWinds makes software that large entities like our US government and Fortune 500 companies use to manage their computer systems. It's absolutely essential software. The hackers have been trying to hack this software for years and had not been able to get in there. So what they did is they hacked where the software was being packaged for distribution out to the customers, inserted malware into the new updates for that software, and when SolarWinds pushed those updates out to their clients, voila, there's a back door into all these organizations. Again, this was SolarWinds has 300,000 customers, but a lot of agencies of the US government and Fortune 500 companies found themselves compromised. The interesting thing here is this was not done. The word ransomware has become a cliche. Everybody thinks that's the only way to hack. No, espionage is still very popular. This attack was done specifically to gather intel on the US and some of our larger organizations. So no ransom was asked. I always think we want to look at the total cost, not just the ransom cost. This one's incalculable. And the attacker is believed to have been Russia itself. Very scary. Next is Microsoft, or specifically a product that Microsoft makes. For years before email was easy in the cloud, Microsoft made a product called Exchange Server, and companies would have a server inside their offices that would host all their email. A lot of older companies still do this, and larger companies still do it as well. The problem is, in January 6th, hackers attacked older versions of Microsoft's server that were still running in companies. Now, if you maintained your Exchange server and patched it and were not running old versions of it, you were okay. But if you were running old versions and hadn't kept it patched, you were totally vulnerable. It's arguable that over 30,000 organizations were hacked. This, again, no ransom was demanded because it was done for espionage reasons. We believe strongly that the attacker was China in this case. So now we have 2 cases where it was espionage, not ransomware or some monetized benefit for the hackers. Number 3, the Colonial Pipeline hack. This one really made the news. They were hacked on May 6th by a hacking organization called DarkSide. There are hundreds of hacking groups. There's probably a couple dozen very large and very well-known ones. This is one of the big ones. Colonial Pipeline as an organization is a $500 million company. And what happened is they weren't practicing good IT. They had a lot of old operating systems running on their computers. They didn't have things patched. In this case, they were hacked through an old VPN connection, and the hackers got a hold of the credentials for an old employee that was no longer with them, who had a back door via VPN into the network. And the hackers figured it out, and they came right on in. They demanded a high ransom. 4.4 million was paid. And within the first week, Colonial Pipeline incurred over $7 million in costs. That's not just the ransom. There's a lot of other costs.
Almost $11.5 million, really, just in that 1 week. And
yeah,
while I do know that, and this was very interesting to me, Ed, that the CIA, I believe, was able to recover some of that ransom.
The first time.
That first time ever. I never,
Yeah.
and I thought Bitcoin, right? Because I believe Bitcoin was the method used
It was.
for the cryptocurrency exchange. And I thought, well, wait a sec, isn't Bitcoin untraceable? But now clearly there must have been some way the CIA was able to trace this. Do you have any intel around that?
I don't, and I'm dying to get some insight.
Yeah.
Because again, the hackers are demanding the ransom be paid in Bitcoin because allegedly it's been untraceable. But it was either the CIA or the FBI. They were able to pull back 2 million of that ransom, and we'll hear more later.
And also, just one other item just to mention about the ransom. I'm starting to read now a few different states in the United States, and I think Pennsylvania was one, if I recall correctly, where they're looking at statewide making payments of ransomware or ransom illegal. I believe it was also in the state Senate at New Jersey, but the bill died on the floor.
Yeah, well, the problem here is that I always like to say, if you have to pay the ransom, it means you weren't doing good IT. You weren't maintaining things right. But for a company that's down and out, okay, they didn't do their IT well. The only option is to pay the ransom. And if you make that illegal, you're basically signing the death warrant of a business.
I believe that's part of the debate and why it may not come to pass where paying a ransom becomes illegal for a cyber attack.
Yeah. So again, a $500 million company, they delivered oil, fuel to most of the East Coast. Very big company, really no reason not to do your IT correctly. You have the money to spend. Number 4, JBS Meatpacking. This was in June, and the hacking group is occasionally called Revil or Evil and different things. They're a Russian hacking group. JBS itself is a global $500 billion company. They're located all over the world. Several locations had their computers hacked. The computers were old software, not updated, and they were easily encrypted. The hackers demanded 22 million in ransom. They were negotiated down to 11 million. Now, what's interesting here is that most casual people don't realize that you can negotiate with the hackers, but it's not something for the faint of heart. It's kind of like if you had a hostage situation, not every police officer is equipped to negotiate. They bring in the professionals. And if you do get hacked, one of the costs that you should expect is bringing in a professional negotiator to work with those hackers. It's often an unanticipated cost, but highly recommended, because if you have to pay the ransom, you can often get it down. Total damages in this are unknown. JBS has been amazingly tight-lipped, and it's been hard to get information. Joe, have you heard much about this one?
Not more than you've already discussed right here.
Okay. Number 5, this is the last one in our lessons to be learned, Kaseya. Kaseya is also a software vendor that makes software that companies like mine would use to manage our client systems. Now, we don't use Kaseya, we use another product, but quite honestly, it could have just as well been our product. Kaseya had been identified as having some vulnerabilities in their software quite some time ago, over a year, and they hadn't fixed them. Their software was hacked just a couple days before the weekend of the 4th of July holiday, very deliberately, because they knew the IT people would all be enjoying the weekend. So they hacked the Kaseya software at these managed service providers, and they used that software to get into the clients of those IT firms. So over 1,500 small businesses were encrypted. Most of their computers at these 1,500 locations were encrypted. The hackers demanded $70 million in ransom to unencrypt all the companies. Kaseya still insists they did not pay the ransom. Total damages are enormous.
So this is interesting, a $70 million ransom demand there. And do you have an idea of the overall revenues for Kaseya?
I do not, but next time I update this chart, I'm going to put it down. But it's a big company.
The reason I ask is there's a science, I believe, by these bad actors in figuring out what dollar amount they're going to put out for the ransom. and what they kind of believe that you're willing to pay or able to pay.
Absolutely. So when hackers hack individuals, they know that most individuals, photos of our wedding and our kids' music and stuff like that, probably is not worth more than a couple $100. So when they hack an individual, they charge a couple $100. If it's a small, medium businesses, it's usually a few 100,000 to maybe a couple million. But these hackers do their homework.
Yes.
There's a team that does the hack. And once they get in, there's another team who comes in and figures out, how do we monetize this opportunity to make the most? And they'll do all kinds of searches about you on the internet to find out. In fact, there was one case I know of where the hackers hacked this company. It was a smallish company, but on their website, they showed this big, impressive building. And the hackers assumed they had a big, impressive building. They must have deep pockets. And so they demanded an enormous ransom. And the negotiator with the hacker had to talk down and say, look, that's gloss. We put that on the website. We don't really have, we're not made of money. So it's important to understand that they look at what they think you're willing and able to pay. Good one, Joe. Come on. So hackers don't want to work hard. They're basically lazy. They prefer if you just let them in. And they like to use social engineering 85% of the time. Social engineering is when the hackers send you an email, make a phone call, have a pop-up on your computer or something to manipulate you into letting them in. They may masquerade as someone you know and trust. Maybe it's your bank. Maybe it's another vendor that you work with. I get lots of emails allegedly from my bank, and I don't even bank with that company, but they don't know that. They're going to send out thousands of these, and a certain percentage of people will click and do their bidding.
They go fishing.
Number two, they're going to say they're here to help you. You know, hey, we're raising our security standards. We want to help keep you secure. They want to create a false sense of urgency. Hey, we have to do this quick. It's very important right now. And boy, since the pandemic started and so many companies had their people working from home, the hackers have played right into that. They know people are stretched, they're working hard, and these three things work quite well for the hackers. The fourth is kind of diabolical. They threaten that they've already hacked you and they've got your information. Well, this may or may not be true. Often it isn't. But if you don't have good IT, you'd never know if they got in or not, and then you have to deal with the assumption they've gotten some confidential data. I get a lot of emails from clients saying, Ed, is this real? No, that's not real. I can tell.
Out of these four right here, Ed, I'm going to say something for the business owners and leaders that are on this call or you're going to watch it later on. A lot of attention needs to be spent to this creation of a false sense of urgency. And this needs to be discussed within the accounting team of every business, with the accounting manager, with the CFO, the controller, accounts payable, accounts receivable. It doesn't make a difference, but that's where that discussion needs to have. Because in my experience with clients that have run into these types of social engineering issues, it oftentimes has come from the CEO's or the president's system being attacked, being hacked. They're now going to be watching the schedule of when the CEO's flying out of town, where they're going to, what hotel they're staying at. So they're going to have a pretty good high degree of understanding of where they're going, so that when they do reach out to the vulnerable party, maybe it's the controller, and they have the message of, look, I'm about to hit that plane. I'm about to get on that plane to get to Kansas City. I'm going to be out of pocket for the next few hours. We got to close on this one new deal. I don't want you telling anybody about it because I want to announce it myself after I get back to the office on Monday, because they know I'm going to be back to the office on Monday. So I need you to take the call from my attorney, Bob, who's going to call you in an hour, and you got to make sure you get the wiring instructions down and get the $358,000 wired out before I arrive in Kansas City. Otherwise, the deal may be off.
Yep. What you're describing, Joe, is what's called a BEC, a business email compromise. And often when employees click the wrong thing and start giving away what their credentials are, the hackers get into your email system and they will lurk for up to a week, and they'll watch who's in charge, how are decisions made. maybe when does this important person go away? Becks are really dangerous. They are social engineering, but they're a specific type and they're very prevalent. So thank you for bringing it up. One thing I want to throw in here is the absolute best protections, dollar for dollar, that you can do to prevent social engineering is security awareness training for your employees. Security awareness training is where each employee is maybe bothered for 5 to 8 minutes a month. They get a little video training, they get a quiz, maybe we send a few simulated phishing emails and record who's doing what, how do they react to these, and all of this is done with the idea of getting your people to be as resilient against these manipulations as possible. It's one of the best things to do. If you've got an IT company, talk to them about doing this for you. Really, really important. Monetizing the opportunity. Well, there's 3 ways that hackers like to earn money. One is encrypt your data so you can't have access to it unless you pay the money. That's where they use ransomware. And you're being extorted to pay the money to get access to your own data. Number 2 is plain old extortion. What happened is over the last 10 years, companies got better about backing up their data. And the hackers were really frustrated by this. So what they've started doing is just copying your data to their servers, and then they demand ransom on the data. They haven't encrypted anything, but they're holding that data hostage. This is just plain old extortion. And the third way is, Joe explained a case of this perfectly, wire transfer fraud, where they manipulate you into just sending them the money without much work at all. But this last one is very prevalent. Very. And
we're going to see a video, about a 2-minute or so video on this very subject shortly.
Exactly.
Stay tuned.
Why is all this happening? Well, there's an over-reliance on a single piece of protection. And I love this photo because that gate's not doing a lot to protect the house. Most business people I talk to, I say, how are you protected? Oh, we've got a firewall and antivirus. That's not enough today. It takes a lot more. This brings us to cybersecurity frameworks. What's a cybersecurity framework? They are the instruction manuals on how IT should be architected, managed, and secured. There's a whole bunch of cybersecurity frameworks out there, over a dozen. They are aimed at different segments of business. So for example, if you're a manufacturer, you're going to want to be ISO 27001, using that one as your cybersecurity framework. It's the instruction guide. And when your customers come to you and say, hey, we want to know how you're secured, you want to say, this is what we're using, and here's what we're doing well. If you're a public organization or a highly regulated industry, you want to use NIST from the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. A really great thing. There's only 1,000 items in the list that we have to do right. But if you're a public organization or a highly regulated company, you need to use NIST. For anyone having to do anything with the government, or especially the Pentagon, maybe you make a product for them or something, or a service, you have to be secured per CMMC, or the Cybersecurity Maturity Model. For our clients, if they're a private entity, they're not heavily regulated, we secure all of them per CIS, from the Center of Internet Security. It's still 153 things we have to lock down. So again, it's not antivirus and just a firewall. That doesn't get you secure. When the pandemic began, I saw this article that was talking about how to protect yourself from the virus. And it wasn't just one thing. A mask wasn't going to do it. You had to wash your hands, you had to wear a mask, you wanted to maintain distances. So it's a list of different things that you're going to do to stay safe. If we use that same analogy on IT security is multiple aspects, multiple things designed to keep you secure. Things like passwords, long and complex, multi-factor authentication, locking down access to only specific devices. It's on and on and on. Again, if we were using the CIS cybersecurity framework, there'd be 153 slices of Swiss cheese, but it keeps businesses pretty secure. That's how a cybersecurity framework is done. Unfortunately, in my industry, it's believed only about 2 to 3% of IT firms secure their firms this way. So what is the government doing? Several states, as Joe mentioned, are considering requiring IT firms to register. Louisiana had a law that just took effect in February that if you do anything, any IT work for a public body of the state, you have to register with that state. I think they are the first ones to pass this. I do not think they will be the last, but it's kind of a shot over the bow of what may be coming in the future. Number two, our nation, President Biden signed a cybersecurity order back in May. He created the order instructs the government to create a standardized response playbook. That may or may not be good. If they're just reinventing the wheel that we already have in cybersecurity frameworks, it's a waste of time. But if they do things that are unique, that'll be great. It does mandate companies doing business with the government must turn over information about their hacks. It creates an incident review board. This will be a lot like when a plane crashes, the Transport Association gets together and they analyze what happened and what they're going to change. So this review board could be very good. And the best part I like is a government rating system of software products. This will help them choose the best products and get them away from anything that's vulnerable. And just like competition in business is a good thing for the consumer, for organizations making software to have to contend with this rating system, it's going to cause them to raise their security. 3 takeaways from my talk. This is the big part. There are different hacking groups with very different motivations. We've already heard about groups that are hacking companies, groups that are hacking governments. So there are state-sponsored hackers. There are individual specialists going after often intellectual property. And then there's the vast quantity of hackers that are going after anything that'll make them money. You secure yourself different ways, but you have to figure out where's the risk. What's the risk to my business? They're going to use different attacking methods. They vary greatly, but 85% of the time, they're going to be using social engineering. As I did in my little slide a moment ago, the best dollar you could spend today would be getting your people educated about the risk and what they need to do. Your technology should be architected and secured per a cybersecurity framework to keep you safe and lower your risk. Now let's head it off to Joe.
All right, thank you very much, Ed. Okay, what a confusing subject cyber insurance can be, right? And time was that the cyber product was referred to purely as cyber liability. But liability implies only coverage for third-party events, not coverage for first-party, meaning your business, your school, your nonprofit. And not all policies are created equal, not even close in some instances. So take yesterday, for example. Yesterday, I had a technology client of mine that wanted to review their limits. And if you are a tech company, software developer, for example, you are going to have technology errors and omissions coverage. And you're also going to have cyber insurance on that exact same form. Because probably what will happen is if there is some sort of errors and omissions event or malpractice event, likely the cyber trigger goes hand in hand. But really, that is the only time I believe currently that the policy for the errors and omissions should be blended in with the cyber. So I don't like it when I see a law firm or a CPA firm or other professional service organizations, an insurance firm, for example, when the malpractice carrier also embeds the cyber insurance cover within the same platform. And here's why. I believe that, particularly as we're talking about professional service organizations, they must maintain an independent cyber insurance product outside of their malpractice. And when I say malpractice, it means the same as errors and omissions. That's also E&O, or professional liability. Okay, it's all one bucket, if you will. And I believe that as a professional service organization, you want to maintain your malpractice insurance for malpractice events. And you want to maintain an independent cyber policy for cyber events and to keep those two separate. So that's number one. The number two is, well, I have a little bit of cyber coverage under my property and general liability insurance policy. Well, that's nice. Something is better than nothing. But again, those are very stripped down limits. Those are very stripped down insurance policy language. So I don't like to rely on a cyber extension under my property insurance policy for a business. I, again, want my own cyber insurance policy specific to cyber events, both first party and third party. So that answers bullet points 3 and 4 right there. I want first party coverage because that is where we find our ransomware cover, our extortionware cover, our we need to pay to fix our systems coverage, our notification costs. So all of the things that go into a data breach that a business is going to be responsible for having to pay to fix to get themselves out of that jam, that's first party. Whereas third party is client or clients. You're holding sensitive, you as the business, you're holding personal identifiable information and the bad actors steal that, okay? Then there could be third party claims around that event that the third party or parties have lost. They've lost monies because of that hack attack, okay? The next item that's really important is, do I have coverage for cyber crime? Now, because of what Ed has shown us in these previous slides here, the insurance marketplace for cyber is taking a much more serious look from an underwriting perspective and also from how much coverage they're going to put up or they're going to offer you. And a lot of times, cyber crime is going to now have a sublimit of insurance. So you might have $2 million worth of coverage. However, cyber crime may be limited to $250,000. So it's important to take a look and understand if the cyber crime is at a sublimit. And let's get back to first party cover again. What about business interruption? Your business, your school, your nonprofit may suffer loss of income because of this cyber attack. You might be offline for a week. What's the impact financially to your business? You're still going to have all your operating costs. You're still going to be having to pay payroll. But if you're not receiving revenues or your revenues have been severely impacted due to this cyber breach event, what kind of business interruption cover do I have under my cyber policy?
Hey,
and
Joe,
I'm going to do one more thing. Yes, Ed.
I was going to say, one thing I run into every time I bring this up with clients, they go, I've got, it's part of my normal insurance. I'm covered. And I'm going, there's all these nuances in cyber insurance. You need to make sure you're checking the boxes for the coverage you need, and you need a professional, not a generalist.
There's about 6 or 7 platforms I really like, cyber insurance platforms out there. Very specific products and very specific carriers that I really like. And there's others I don't like as much. But they all have nuances, as you said yesterday. Hanover Insurance, for that technology client, they have the cyber and the professional liability. And again, this is the one industry, tech, where it is good to have the policy, both the errors and omissions and the cyber put together. The others, no, but this industry, yes. I was looking through the policy and I said, oh my God, I don't see ransomware specifically named in the cybercrime portion. So then I thumbed through a little bit further because they keep mentioning cyber extortion. So I said, well, I'm going to flip to the definition of cyber extortion in the policy. So I get there, and then I was able to cyber extortion. They drilled down and talked about ransomware in particular. So I said, okay, good. Because a lot of times policies will name ransomware specifically and might not name extortion in there. So it comes down to that language. And again, there is no uniformity in these cyber insurance policies. Gosh, it'd be nice if there were, but it's not. And it's not the case and not the reality. And that's why, to your point, a professional insurance advisor needs to be involved in order to review and guide the school, the nonprofit, the business to the proper solution that works for their organization. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Before we start with the next slide, I want to remind people that please, if you've got questions, put them in the chat or the Q&A forum. We will try and answer those questions, but Joe's sharing some really valuable stuff. This stuff is not easy, it's complex. Now's the time to ask your questions and we'll try and work them in.
Thank you, Ed, I appreciate that. And for those that are going to be watching this recording afterwards, certainly you can send us emails if you got questions, after this session as well. So, okay, what are the elements of a robust cyber insurance policy, Ed? What are those elements? Well, you know what? Good news. I've listed them out for you. And in my opinion, there's 5 robust elements here. So number 1 is the cyber incident response costs that the insurance policy is going to pay for the forensic costs, for the legal, for the public relations, for the consumer notifications, the credit monitoring and such, okay? So I wanna make sure I've got that. Then we wanna make sure we definitely have cyber crime cover. So we talked about social engineering and the funds transfer fraud, and we're gonna see that video shortly here. What if it's theft of funds held in escrow? What if it's a real estate company? What about cyber extortion, ransomware, cryptojacking, cybercrime? What about system damage? So the bad guys get in and now they've damaged my system. I've got to reconstruct my software. There could be reputation harm, the business interruption we talked about, the replacement cost of software, hardware. So those, what I just mentioned here, those first 3 items are all first-party costs, first-party coverage. Well, now we get down to the third-party side, which is the actual cyber and privacy liability. Liability, again, implies third party. So that includes here, which is really interesting because other types of insurance policies, whether it be malpractice, whether it be director and officer cover, whether it be employment practice liability, they do not include regulatory fines and penalties. For wage and hour coverage under an employment practice liability policy, if there is wage and hour cover, they're not going to pick up fines, settlement, judgment. They'll pick up defense costs, but they're not going to pick up those other components. Whereas a cyber policy, actually a good one, has built in regulatory fines, penalties, PCI fines, and assessment costs. And what else am I getting for my insurance dollar, okay? That's nice that I have a policy, but what risk management services are also included? Is there a 24/7 incident response advice hotline? What complementary risk management services are there? And I want to know those services, and I want to have my managed IT care professional, the company that is overseeing my IT, understand what policy I have and what the risk management services are, because I want to have them speak with each other. And the other thing I want to do too is I want to make sure that my IT managed care knows my cyber insurance policy number, knows the hotline, knows the expiration date of that policy. And I also have it written down somewhere, because when my systems are locked up, well, that's where all my data is. It's going to tell me, what's the 1-800 number I'm supposed to be calling immediately.
Let me add a comment here. So yeah. Often when I'm talking to clients about this, I'm saying, when your insurance company sends you statements, are you doing X, Y, and Z to secure yourselves? I must see that statement. I do not want the customer making an erroneous statement that they're doing something that we're not. Because if they do, you could be denied coverage. That you could be lying on the application. It is very important that you are in lockstep, your insurance with your IT people, so that we're doing the right things that the insurance company is demanding.
You hit on a key point, Ed, and here's why. Beginning of cyber insurance, back when it was referred to as cyber liability. So let's hit the rewind button 10, 15 years ago. The application was pretty extensive, 8, 9, 10 pages. Really, I mean, it was designed for managed IT care professionals to answer it, not the CFO of the org. Sure, they'll have financial info questions and about the operations. The CFO or whomever is going to answer that. But the technical stuff's got to be handled by your partner, by your managed IT care partner. Then the cyber insurance market, they looked around and they said, yeah, there's a lot of money we can make in this particular product. So you know what? God, it seems like we're missing out on opportunities. Our clients aren't buying this coverage. People aren't buying this coverage. So we're going to shrink that application process down to 3 or 4 questions. What's the name of the business? What's the address? What's their revenue? What type of business are they in? Yeah, that'll do it. They had a problem in the past. That's good enough. We'll figure it out. So now they have this capacity here. So more and more people found it a couple of questions. The cost isn't too much. We're getting some good coverage here. Okay, that's great. Well, of course, in the last year or two, it's flipped again because of the number of claims, because of the ransomware and the cyber crime, social engineering. Because of those factors, now it's flipping. And again, it goes back to those long questionnaires, not for the CFO to answer, but really mainly for the managed IT care professional to answer. And that's a really good point. Do not try to do those applications by yourself. You're not, unless you're a computer whiz. I mean, and I am not. I am handing it off to my trusted managed IT care advisor to fill out that part, or the questions that pertain to it in the cyber renewal or the first time cyber application. Shall we move on?
We shall. Oh, good.
What's a slideshow without Dr. Evil?
How about no?
Well, this is what I want your internal accounting team to say to those attempts at social engineering, to those attempts at cybercrime. And you know what? Let's go to that next slide, which is the video, and we're going to understand why Dr. Evil is going to tell them no.
Before I flip to it, I would love it if a couple of our attendees would type in the chat that they can hear the audio.
Hi, I'm Pat with Evolve. Why do you need cyber insurance? 3 words: wire transfer fraud.
Meet Dan. Dan is the head of a profitable mid-sized company, enjoying himself on a well-deserved vacation. Meet Dimitri, aka Muffin Man 13. Dimitri's the head of a cybercrime ring that tricks businesses into wire transfer fraud. Meet Calvin. Calvin is Dan's CFO. Calvin will not have a job in the next 24 hours. Why? Well, while Dan was busy getting his limbo on, Dimitri was stealing Dan's email credentials. Dimitri, emailed Calvin instructions to wire $147,000 to their largest client's bank account, aka Dimitri's new Tesla account. Wire transfer fraud can happen to any business. Dan was smart enough to protect his with a cyber policy from Evolve. Do you have a cyber policy in place?
That's great. I love that every time I see it.
Thank you. And that actually is the product I buy at Cal Insurance itself. I buy that particular product. There's other products that are up there that I like that are on the same sort of footing. It just happens to be the one that I purchased for this organization. And it really boils it down. I mean, it's a goofy little video, but it's hitting at the core of what is happening behind the scenes in a social engineering attack. So I just cannot emphasize enough. And it happens to our organization too. My accounting manager gets those emails from time to time saying, go ahead and make sure you wire, X amount of money every. We know. We have the conversation. I'm not just going to send an email saying, wire that money away. There needs to be a verbal discussion before we ever would do anything like that. And it's all about educating that internal accounting staff. So ransomware, 2020 was a banner year, but hey, 2021, I think will overtake that. So a couple of very, very quick bullet points here. And law enforcement agencies estimated about $350 million in 2020 for ransomware, a 311% increase over 2019. And at the time, and this is according to Palo Alto Networks, the average ransomware payment was just over $312,000, Ed. We know that in 2021, we discussed the 4.4 million from Colonial, according to the Wall Street Journal. This one did not catch as much press for one reason or another. I'm not sure why. CNA is an insurance company. They're headquartered out of Chicago. They are one of the larger insurance companies in the United States. They had suffered a really bad cyber attack, and this will go into business interruption. I'm going to tell you a little story about it. There is an insurance company that Cal works with. We work with CNA and Hartford and Liberty Mutual and Hanover and carriers like that. So CNA is a preferred market for businesses. And so they sell cyber insurance. They have a product and a platform. They paid allegedly $40 million in late March because their systems were breached, and that was the ransomware. And what happened was we as brokers, as insurance advisors, we work with them, and underwriting was locked out for weeks. They couldn't underwrite submissions. They could not do it. They would tell us, oh, we'd love to take this risk on, but you're going to have to send it to one of our competitors. We just can't do it. Our systems are not up and running. We can't appropriately do what we need to do to underwrite it, go through the files, et cetera, et cetera. So it stung, and it's still, the impact to CNA is still out there. And so ransomware, as we understand, as we know now, those demands have increased exponentially, and that's according to Hathaway Global Strategies. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, so Homer Simpson makes an appearance here, because just when we thought we had this ransomware figured out, now we're starting to hear about extortion events. So it says here, and this is from Insurance Business America, everyone's favorite insurance journal.
I read it every night.
This is from April, the April edition here. And they report in 2020, a new wave of ransomware attacks hit the market, and double extortion became the known event. So how are they doing it, right? The probability of maximizing the profit by threatening the victim with an additional abuse of the information they encrypted. So they're going to say, hey, I got this stuff. We have this stuff, hacked company. And now we are going to take this stuff and we are going to sell it or auction it on the black market, the deep dark web, unless you pay us X. So that's extortion, right? So now is extortion, and again, underneath the definition in my policy, is it within the extortion of a cyber event? Is it cyber extortion? How is it defined in my insurance policy? Because I want to make sure that I have both ransom and extortion covered in my first party language. And so Ed, this speaks to your point earlier today in our discussion. These bad actors, they're spending a significant amount of time doing research. They're in the computer systems already gathering the information, as you had discussed, before they deploy this ransomware.
One team gets in, the next team comes in and figures out what's the value of this. How can we get the most money from this opportunity? It's a business thing to them.
Right. It is. And I understand there's help desks for hackers as well.
Yeah, well, they want to make it easier for you to pay their fees. Yeah, it's getting crazy, and until something significantly changes, this is going to continue. I see no hope of it changing in the short run. We've got to protect ourselves.
Absolutely. And how do we do that, Ed? We do that through having a outstanding managed IT care partner that's overseeing our home, that doesn't just put in that little gate to block the sidewalk, but leaves the grass and every other area exposed to come on through.
Yep.
And also with a sound insurance program. And I'll tell you this, cyber insurance is a solution, but not the solution. You can't have cyber insurance without having a proper managed IT care partner. It just doesn't work. You need to have both.
So Joe, we were just asked, you're going to read it. Go ahead.
Oh, I was not. I wasn't aware, but here we go.
So we got a question from Emma. How do you recommend a company handle an extortion threat without paying the ransom?
So what's going to happen?
If you don't mind, I'll start with that. So
yeah, thank you.
The best protection is prevention. So if we've done the right things to lower the likelihood of these things happening, you're off to a good start. Number two, people often ask me, why do you what's different about you guys? Everybody does IT. Sagacent decided to do IT in a different manner to where we manage our clients per cybersecurity frameworks. It's not the least expensive way to manage clients, but it gets you the best results. But if you're doing that kind of stuff, you also get alerts. You can see when the hackers get in. You can see what they get access to. If they threaten that they've gotten in and they've gotten your data, and we can see that they didn't, you don't have to pay that ransom. And if we've done good IT and you got ransomware, we can restore from backups. You don't have to pay the ransom. And if they say they've copied your data again, and there's no proof that they were in there, you don't have to pay the ransom. Again, good quality IT is the way to mitigate most of this risk. But I twist the arm of my clients all the time. I say, but please, please, please get cyber insurance as well, because it's not if it happens, it's when it happens. And we need to make your business whole if the worst should happen.
So let's play this out, Ed, just to take it a little bit. Your answer was perfect. It was spot on, spot on. Let's play it out though. So I'm the business. Oh my God, they're threatening me. They say they've got all this data on our company or on our clients, et cetera, et cetera. And they want me to pay $800,000, let's say, for example. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call my managed IT care partner for the reasons you just listed out to figure out, is this a real threat or what's happening here? The next thing I'm doing, though, in tandem, actually, is I'm calling my 24/7 hotline with the cyber insurance policy to put them on alert and to start to trigger legal services with them. That's the next thing I'm doing. The third step, Ed, we may agree at some point that, oh my gosh, we may need to give the FBI a call as well right now. Those are the three steps. Do you see it any differently than those three steps?
I would add another one in there where you definitely want to call your business lawyer and get them ready to protect you.
Well, that's actually when I was speaking to the 24/7 hotline, the legal services are going to be within that as well. There's going to be specific cyber legal experts. So while I do have perhaps outside general counsel, I'm going to want to work in tandem with the insurance carrier.
Yeah, you need a team working for you when this happens. Chip asks, if the threat is to release the info they all actually have, seems like the most important and expensive response is professional negotiation. Is that covered by most insurance?
I'm going to put it, I'll say this, that if the policy allows for ransomware and extortion, then we're off to a great start, right, underneath the cyber crime. But the insurance company needs to be notified. They don't want you making that payment without them knowing. So what you need to do, again, is your 24/7 incident response hotline in conjunction with your managed IT care partner. Hey, insurance company, this is what we're looking at. This is what they're demanding. They're your partner in this. So they're going to work with you on that. Okay. Does that make sense?
Totally.
All right, cool.
Let's move on.
All right.
Your takeaways.
You know what? 5 thoughts. If you remember nothing else from this insurance report, you had to go run and refill your coffee, whatever it is, you snoozed for 15 minutes during my talk right there. Here, I'm going to give it to you real quick on 5 points here. Number 1, hire a fantastic managed IT care partner. And it was the coffee. Absolutely. Thank you, Tyler. Number 2, consider hiring. Now, this is an interesting one. And a lot of businesses, schools, nonprofits avail themselves of this option. Consider hiring another independent IT consultant for a penetration test. Ed, do you want to expand upon that?
Well, I was going to say, actually, the number one way we get new business is by coming in and auditing how IT is configured at a client site. Generally, it's pretty abysmal. The penetration test is nice, but that's further down the line. You really don't want to pay for a penetration test until we know that everything looks to be secure, because otherwise it's wasted money. Generally, we can walk into an organization within minutes and tell you how secure you are. And that's one of the free offers I'll talk about at the end that I'm giving the attendees today.
And we do something similar on the insurance side where we call it a professional review, but it would be an audit, right? So a prospective client is introduced to us. During that initial meeting, we then say, hey, send us everything that looks insurance-y in your files via PDF. We want to see all copies of all insurance policies, all recent applications that were completed, all of that stuff. And we're going to sort through it. And then we conduct a professional review off of it. And that's oftentimes how we gain our new clients and our new business, just based upon our findings and so forth. So that's number 2. Number 3, and we talked about this as well, educate your staff, your accounting staff on social engineering fraud. Talk it up. The threat is real. The risk is real. Talk it up internally. Number 4.
In fact, Joe, I'll make an offer. This wasn't one of the calls to action or free offers at the end. Anybody attending this webinar, if you want me to come out and talk to your staff, I'm happy to do it.
Value right there. I love it. Number 4, after you've done all of these things, because remember, an insurance policy is a solution, not the solution. You got to take those 3 items first, and then when the house is in order, you obtain a robust cyber insurance policy, knowing that not any policy is created equal. They're all going to be different. And Joe has his favorites, and you got to make sure it's robust.
And enlist the help of your IT people. I think that annually, when that policy comes up for renewal, you two should have a sit-down discussion. Okay, what's changed in the business? Have we changed our direction of where we're going? Is our security in line with what we're doing? It's really important. It's a team effort.
And then finally, understand the complementary services offered and what to do in advance of a cyber incident. Okay, so just a recap of the conversation and the points there. Oh my gosh, Ed, it's 10:58.
Yep.
This flew by.
We always does when we talk, huh?
Well, thank you to those who took time to attend today. If you're watching this on a recording afterwards, thank you for taking the time to watch the recording. We've had some great questions and I think some really good dialogue here today, Ed. I'm going to take a peek to see if there's anything else outstanding. I don't think there's any additional questions. Should we keep it open for another minute or two in case people want to type in something to the Q&A?
Certainly. But I do want to call out that our offer to the attendees today is if you want to get in touch with either of us, we're willing to have a conversation with you, give you some free advice, entertain the challenges, discuss what you're going through, and give you some ideas. The answer is not always Joe or myself, and we're happy to tell you that. But if we can alleviate some of your stress on this and point you in the right direction, we're happy to do it. And then the final offer I made a moment ago, that if you want me to come out to your staff free of charge and do kind of a cybersecurity training with all of them and talk to them, sharing a lot of the information from this webinar, I'm happy to do it. Just contact me and mention that you attended this webinar.
Well, Ed, I think we were probably very clear and very succinct in our presentation today, because I do not see any additional questions. So, oh, wait, just as I say that. What about ensuring, oh, okay, this is interesting here. What about ensuring third-party providers, for example, cloud platforms, are also secure and have insurance themselves?
We commonly deal with that. So I get so many clients who will say, hey, we're using this this product in the cloud. I had a law firm the other day that had already moved a bunch of stuff to the cloud and not discussed it with me. And they said, well, they said they're secure. I said, we have to verify that they're secure. Give me their contact info. Give me your account number. I'm going to call them. I want to know how they're secured and how you're going to be protected. I don't mind if a client wants to move to a cloud product, but let's make darn sure that it's secured properly. The major behemoths in the industry, they do amazing security, but it could be Bob's Garage, just by a different name. We need to make sure that they're taking the proper steps to do that. On the other side of that coin, increasingly, I'm getting calls from clients who are saying, hey, my customers are asking how we're secured. They want some kind of statement to make sure that we're following the proper procedure that they're telling their clients. Being the vendor of your client, it puts them at certain risk. And so Increasingly, I'm seeing organizations that are demanding that their vendors have certain security and be able to articulate how that's done.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Ed. And thank you all for participating this morning. Again, Joe Delucci, Cal Insurance, contact info's down there. If you wish to discuss anything within your cyber platform or your insurance platform in general, please feel free to reach out. We welcome a discussion.
Thank you very much, folks.
All right. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.